until the last breath. It all started on the kind of afternoon that seemed too ordinary to change a life. Amelia had ducked into a small coffee shop on the corner of Charles Street, the kind with chalkboard menus, creaky wooden chairs, and the smell of cinnamon baked into the walls. She was late for work, her laptop bag sliding off her shoulder, her phone buzzing with unanswered emails. But when she pushed through the door, she froze. The place was nearly full, the hum of chatter filling the air, but her eyes landed instantly on a man sitting alone by the window. He wasn't particularly flashy. Plain gray hoodie, book open in his hands. But something about the calm way he sat there, unbothered by the bustle around him, made him stand out. Amelia ordered quickly, and when the barista called her name, the man at the window looked up. His eyes, deep, steady brown, met hers, and for a second, the whole shop went silent. "Busy morning?" he asked, nodding toward her overloaded bag as she grabbed her drink. Amelia blinked. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because your coffee looks like it might be the only thing keeping you upright," he said with a grin. She laughed, surprised at how easily the sound slipped out. Something in his voice was disarming, grounding, like he'd spoken to her 100 times before instead of just now. They ended up talking, first about books. His was a dog-eared copy of The Alchemist, then about work. His name was Daniel, an EMT who lived a few blocks away. "Never boring," he said of his job, though Amelia caught the shadows in his eyes when he talked about it. She told him about her work in marketing, how sometimes it felt like a race she didn't remember signing up for. He listened intently, the kind of listening that made her feel like her words mattered. By the time she glanced at her phone again, she was 20 minutes late, but for the first time in months, she didn't care. "Same time tomorrow?" Daniel asked as she gathered her things. Her heart thudded in a way it hadn't in years. "Yeah," she said softly. "Same time." Tomorrow became a week became a month. And before Amelia even realized it, Daniel had become the best part of her days. They discovered they both loved late-night walks through the city, the way streetlights painted everything gold. They both hated olives but loved extra cheese on pizza. Daniel was hopeless at cooking, while Amelia could whip up a full meal from random leftovers. He teased her about her obsession with sticky notes, and she teased him about the way he always carried 3 pens in his pocket, just in case. It wasn't fireworks all the time. It was better. It was laughter in the grocery store aisle, warm hands held during crowded subway rides, notes scribbled on napkins and tucked into each other's bags. It was the comfort of knowing someone saw you fully, flaws and all, and stayed. 6 months in, Daniel took her to his favorite place, a rooftop above the firehouse where he sometimes sat after long shifts. The city stretched beneath them, alive with lights and motion. He pulled out a guitar, shyly admitting he wasn't great, and strummed a clumsy tune while Amelia leaned against him. "I'm not much of a singer," he said, grinning when she laughed at his off-key attempt. "You don't have to be," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "I like your voice just as it is." He kissed her then, and it felt less like a spark and more like a promise. A year after they met, Daniel moved into Amelia's apartment. The mornings became a dance of shared coffee mugs and tangled routines, the nights a blend of laughter and quiet comfort. She learned the sound of his key in the lock, the way he hummed under his breath when he was tired, the way he always made space for her dreams. And though his job was heavy, full of emergencies and close calls, Daniel rarely let the darkness of it spill into their home. But some nights, when he came in late, Amelia would catch the weight in his shoulders. "You saved someone today," she'd say gently. "Not always," he admitted once, voice breaking. She took his hand then, held it tight. "But you tried. And that's everything." 2 years after that first coffee shop encounter, Daniel proposed. Not with a grand gesture, but on that same rooftop, guitar in hand. "I don't have a song for this," he said nervously, strumming nonsense chords. "But I do have a question." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it with shaking fingers. "Amelia, you're my best friend, my safe place, my whole damn world. Will you marry me?" Her breath caught, tears already spilling. She didn't even let him finish before blurting, "Yes, of course, yes." The city buzzed beneath them, alive with a million stories, but up there on the rooftop, theirs felt like the only one that mattered. For the next year, their lives spun with wedding plans, work, and ordinary magic. They argued about cake flavors, laughed over dance lessons, and fell asleep making lists of places they'd travel. Everywhere they went, people could feel it, the quiet but undeniable love between them. Not the flashy kind, but the kind built on showing up, again and again. Amelia often thought back to that first day in the coffee shop, how easily she could have walked past him, never knowing. The thought scared her sometimes. But then Daniel would smile at her like she was the only person in the world, and she knew some things were just meant to be. They didn't know it then. How fleeting their time together would be, how love sometimes writes stories that end too soon. But in those days, in their laughter, in their promises, in their endless tomorrows, they believed in forever, and for a while, forever felt possible. At first, married life was everything Amelia had hoped for. Their wedding had been small: family, close friends, and a string of fairy lights in the backyard of her parents' house. Daniel wore a navy suit with a crooked tie, and Amelia walked barefoot down the aisle, her dress brushing the grass. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises full of humor and honesty, and when the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel dipped her in a kiss that made everyone laugh and cheer. "Forever," he whispered against her lips. "Forever," she whispered back. Their honeymoon was modest, a week in a cabin near the mountains, where they hiked during the day and curled up by the fireplace at night. They didn't need luxury, they just needed each other. Back home, life settled into a rhythm. They decorated their apartment with mismatched furniture, hosted dinners for friends, and built traditions of their own. Friday nights meant takeout and bad movies, Saturday mornings meant pancakes, and every Sunday they walked hand in hand to the park, where Daniel would buy Amelia flowers from the old vendor on the corner. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes they argued about money or chores. Sometimes Daniel's shifts left Amelia alone in bed. Sometimes Amelia's stress at work spilled over into sharp words. But no matter what, they always found their way back. Apologies whispered in the dark, hugs that mended cracks before they widened. For a time, it felt like nothing could touch them. But life has a way of testing even the strongest love. The first test came late one night when Amelia was waiting for Daniel to come home. His shift had ended hours earlier, but he hadn't answered her texts. By midnight, panic clawed at her chest. Just as she was about to call the hospital, the door finally opened. Daniel stepped in, uniform stained, face pale. "What happened?" Amelia gasped, rushing to him. He shook his head, sinking onto the couch. "Car accident, multiple victims. His voice cracked, and he buried his face in his hands. "I couldn't save them all." Amelia's heart broke at the raw grief in his voice. She knelt in front of him, cupping his face. "You did everything you could. You always do." He shook his head, eyes wet. "Sometimes it's not enough." That night, he held her tighter than usual, as if anchoring himself against the tide of loss. After that, Amelia noticed the shadows more often. Daniel still laughed, still teased, still kissed her good morning. But sometimes she caught him staring into space, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. One Saturday, she suggested they skip their usual park walk and drive to the coast instead. They spent the afternoon on the beach, sand between their toes, gulls wheeling overhead. For a while, Daniel seemed lighter, chasing her into the waves, laughing as the cold water splashed them both. But later, as the sun dipped low, he grew quiet again. "What is it?" Amelia asked gently. He hesitated. "Sometimes I think about how fragile it all is, how quickly everything can change." Amelia's chest tightened. "That's why we have to live it fully," she said, slipping her hand into his. "That's why I want to make every day count, with you." He smiled faintly, but she saw the weight in his eyes. The second test came months later, in the form of a phone call. Amelia had just finished a late meeting when her phone buzzed. It was Daniel's firehouse. Her stomach dropped. She answered with a shaky, "Hello? Mrs. Carter? Daniel's been injured. He's stable, but you should come." The words blurred as panic roared in her ears. She barely remembered the drive to the hospital, her heart slamming with every mile. When she finally saw him, bandaged arm, bruised face but alive, relief flooded her so hard she sobbed. "I'm fine," he murmured as she clung to him. "Really, I'm okay." "You scared me half to death," she whispered against his chest. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "It comes with the job." Amelia pulled back, tears streaking her face. "Then maybe I hate your job." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Daniel's expression flickered with hurt, but he only nodded. "I know." For days after, Amelia wrestled with guilt. She knew Daniel's work mattered. He saved lives, brought comfort to people on their worst days. But loving him meant living with the constant fear that one day he wouldn't come home. And that fear began to seep into everything. Their friends noticed. At dinners, Amelia laughed less. Daniel spoke less. When asked about the future, kids, a house, plans, they deflected with jokes. One evening, Amelia finally voiced the question gnawing at her. "Do you ever wish for something different?" Daniel looked at her across the table, candlelight flickering between them. "Different how?" "Safer, easier, less uncertain." He reached across, taking her hand. "Amelia, I wish I could promise you safety. But this is who I am. Helping people. It's not just a job. It's me." Tears stung her eyes. "And what about me? What about us?" His grip tightened. "You're my heart. You're the reason I keep going out there, because I want to make the world safer, for us, for the life we're building." Amelia swallowed hard, torn between pride and fear. She knew he meant every word, and she knew, deep down, that loving him meant accepting the risks. But still, in the quiet of night, she sometimes lay awake, listening to his steady breathing, wondering how many more tomorrows they would get. What neither of them knew was that the greatest test was still to come, the one that would demand everything Daniel had and leave Amelia with a love story carved forever into her soul. The following months unfolded like chapters written in two different languages, one of radiant love, the other of creeping dread. Amelia and Daniel grew closer than ever. They filled their weekends with adventure, hiking trails, exploring hidden parts of the city, and hosting small gatherings where laughter echoed into the night. Their marriage was strong, their bond unshakable, and yet, beneath the surface, Amelia could feel it. The sense that time was always running faster than it should. Every time Daniel kissed her goodbye before a shift, she clung to him a little longer. Every time she heard a siren in the distance, her heart leapt into her throat. And though she tried to bury it, fear curled in the corners of her heart. But love has a way of turning fear into urgency, and Amelia decided she wasn't going to let dread steal their moments. One autumn evening, they drove to the countryside, the windows rolled down, the crisp air swirling in. Leaves painted the world in shades of fire, amber, crimson, gold, and Amelia reached across to lace her fingers with Daniel's. "Let's make a list," she said suddenly. "A list?" "Yeah. Of all the things we still want to do together, big things, little things, doesn't matter. Daniel chuckled. Like a bucket list? More like a love list. So they began. They scribbled on napkins at the diner where they stopped for pie, laughing as they argued over silly details. See the northern lights. Take dance lessons without giving up halfway. Buy a fixer-upper house and paint it yellow. Get lost in Italy. Have kids, maybe 2. Grow old and still hold hands at the park. By the time they drove home, the napkin was filled with dreams, both outrageous and ordinary. Daniel tucked it into his wallet. Our future, he said softly. Amelia kissed him, holding on to the taste of hope. But reality had its own plans. One night in December, Daniel came home later than usual. His face was drawn, his hands trembling slightly. He tried to brush it off, but Amelia caught the look in his eyes. Daniel, talk to me, she urged. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. It was a house fire. We pulled out a little boy. He's going to make it. But his sister... His voice cracked, and Amelia's chest ached at the rawness in his tone. She sat beside him, wrapping her arms around him. You did everything you could, she whispered. But it wasn't enough, he choked out. Amelia held him as his body shook with quiet sobs. And in that moment, she realized that the man who seemed invincible to everyone else was still painfully human, still carrying wounds invisible to the eye. I love you, she whispered fiercely, as if love could shield him from the weight of the world. And I'll carry this with you. The holidays came, softening the heaviness with small joys. They decorated their tiny apartment with twinkling lights and a crooked tree that leaned dangerously to one side. Daniel burned the cookies. Amelia laughed until she cried, and for a while, it felt like the shadows receded. On Christmas morning, Daniel surprised her with a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket, engraved with the words, "Forever, no matter what." Amelia's throat tightened as she clasped it around her neck. You're stuck with me, you know, she whispered. Good, Daniel said, kissing her forehead. That's exactly where I want to be. But as the new year dawned, so did the weight of reality. Daniel's shifts grew longer, the emergencies heavier. Amelia tried to distract herself with work, friends, and hobbies, but the worry gnawed at her. One evening, while waiting for him to come home, she found herself staring at the napkin list taped to their fridge. Her eyes blurred with tears. Grow old and still hold hands at the park. She whispered the words out loud, clinging to them like a prayer. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late January, a bitterly cold evening. Amelia was curled up on the couch when her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Hey, love. His voice crackled through the line. I'm running late. Big call. I'll be home soon. Be safe, she said automatically, her chest tightening. Always, he promised. I love you. I love you too. She didn't know it then. It would be the last time she ever heard his voice so calm, so certain. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then, just after 1 a.m., her phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. Her stomach dropped. She answered with a trembling, Hello? Mrs. Carter? This is Captain Hughes from the firehouse. There's been an incident. Daniel. The world tilted. Words blurred into noise. All she caught was explosion. Trapped. Critical situation. Her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, the phone clattering beside her. By the time Amelia arrived at the scene, the night was ablaze with flashing lights. Firefighters moved like shadows against the inferno of a collapsed building. The air reeked of smoke and gasoline. Through the chaos, she caught sight of Daniel, his figure silhouetted against the flames as he led a group of people out of the wreckage. Her heart soared with relief, until she realized he was turning back. "Daniel!" she screamed, her voice lost in the roar of the fire. But he didn't stop. Someone shouted, "There's still a child inside!" And without hesitation, Daniel vanished into the flames. Amelia's body went cold. Every second stretched into eternity as she stood frozen, her fists pressed to her chest, whispering frantic prayers. Minutes later, the world erupted, shouts, movement, chaos, as Daniel emerged, carrying a small boy in his arms. Relief surged through Amelia. He was alive. He'd done it. But then, before he could reach safety, a deafening crash split the air. Part of the building collapsed, sending a shower of debris cascading down. Amelia's scream tore from her throat as Daniel twisted, shielding the boy with his own body. The child tumbled free, wailing, while Daniel was buried beneath the weight of rubble and flame. In that moment, time stopped. The love of her life had made the ultimate choice. And Amelia knew, even before the firefighters pulled her back, that her forever had just been shattered.